Hello guys, and welcome back to Joe's Ventures. And today we're doing an episode because I'm stuck in the Carboniferous. No, obviously I'm not stuck in the Carboniferous. I can't even speak now. I'm not stuck there because I don't have a time machine, but I have the next best thing. This is the Carboniferous Forest Simulator. It's a little indie little game that's been made by a couple people from the fossil forums, and this was the alpha they released back in 2015, and I actually love it. Like, even though it's not that big, it only shows a little map with a bunch of plants, and it's really educational. It tells you a lot about the world at this time, because the Carboniferous itself is a very interesting time in our history. This was before these are basically the first big forests. These are a lot of first big trees, just a lot of firsts in this time. So we're gonna have a look around. See who we can spot. Now let's see what this is. We can have a look at you. Okay, this is calamites, which is these, and it even says up here, these relatively strange looking plants are closely related to modern horsetails, that they grew much larger, sometimes up to 30 meters tall. Their giant appearance combined with their hollow woody stems means they can also bear some resemblance to bamboo, though bamboo is an incredibly distant relative that won't evolve for many millions of years. Calamites have large underground stems called ribosomes that not only firmly anchored them into the soil, but also enabled them to create clones of themselves as two stems grew from different areas on the ribosome. This means that many of the calamites you see here are made to be part of the same plant. Now that's cool. You can see convergent evolution there. Convergent evolution is where two animals or two groups of organisms, like this is a perfect example, where they both evolve something independently, or something very similar independently for a same problem. A good example here is obviously calamites and bamboo for growing tall. Growing real tall here, look at that, yeah. Also dolphins and sharks, very streamlined shape, good for swimming through water. Some many good examples. So we'll have a quick look through, see what else we can find. We'll have a look through here. Oh, you can see here's some more horsetails. These are smaller ones. So these are the ones that look more like horsetails of today. You see around there. Oh, you better be careful. There's a lot of big amphibians sitting in here. Now we're going to see what's under the water. It's a little very swampy. This is over the tropical rainforest. Have a look, see where you can find it. What's this plant? Now this is medullosa. Forgive me for butchering the pronunciation, but at least it's up here that you can read yourself. Here it says, growing with a woody stem and leafy fronds, this seed fern may appear just to be normal or strange as any other plant you've seen so far, but don't let its exterior fool you. Apart from its usual interior arrangement of vascular tissues, its seeds can be fairly large, up to 6 centimeters, and their pollens are giant as well, up to 300 millimeters long. So that's 3 centimeters. That's pretty huge. The large size of the pollen grains and seeds suggest that plants relied on a pollinator to move its pollen and seeds around, though this hypothesis is fairly difficult to evaluate scientifically. Medulla, also referred to as can refer to the fossil stem plant or the whole plant itself, while its foliage may be known as other names depending on its form. Nepteries, Evolutionary, and even Auditoris or something, which is shown here as another plant. Perhaps the Auditoris is a younger form. So the thing is with plants, also with fossilization, is that it's very hard to tell if a leaf belongs to one plant or a stem to another plant. It's kind of hard to put them all together until you find one that's like perfectly preserved, so you get a good idea of how they all compare to each other. That's a very interesting plant. Look at that. Let's see what we can make around here. Some more horsetails, and here's some more of those calamites, the really big horsetail things. Let's see what we can make around here. Let's see what this plant. What's this plant? This is Sandoris. Despite their similar appearance, Sandoris is a tree fern rather than a sea fern like medullosa. Pasnoris reproduces with spores, which are distributed by wind from growths on the leaves called sporangia, like modern ferns you may be familiar with. The leaves are known as fossils, as the fossil genus is Pictoteris, though the leaves are also associated with several other species of plant from around the time. These fossils are fairly common in the Carboniferous plant-bearing formations, just as common as they are today. So even though they're this far back, there's still things that we would recognize today, which is really cool. It shows how long a lot of these species do endure in a lot of these groups. And just, they're so good at surviving, they manage to live on till today. If you were to cut down one of these first, you would notice that a woody trunk with grown roots, as you would see. No, you wouldn't find that. You wouldn't find a wooden trunk with growth rings in it, as you find in normal trees. Instead, you would find that the plant is supported by a root mantle, which forms many roots that extend from the stem. So if you see here, it's kind of like a, instead of like something solid, it's just like this. It's just incredible. See, it's something you'd recognize from today. You can see these fronds coming up. That's so cool. See what you can find. Okay, well, here's some more calamites. It's a bit the same one. Just a little bigger. This one's huge. You can imagine what you see running around here. There'll be some interesting species. I don't know if we've already covered these ones, I think. Yeah. Medullosa. Forgive me for my poor pronunciation, but I think we'll be fine. Oh, here's a nice one. Let's see what these are. Okay. Ompteres. These seed ferns resemble modern ferns, that they reproduce using seeds instead of spores, so they can, as they grow much larger and more tree-like than most modern ferns should be expected to. The closest living relatives are most likely cycads rather than ferns. In addition to reproducing using seeds instead of spores, seed ferns like Ompteres also use a form of protopollen, which is an evolutionary intermediate between spores and true pollen. So you can see here a lot of these systems are just developing now using pollen, just because these are really the first forests. So they're trying to figure out ways to distribute their seeds so they can find good places they can use. Because also bees and things weren't really a thing back in this time, so they used a lot of the giant insects that lived around here, like arthropleura and those giant cockroaches, and a lot of very interesting species of invertebrates to be able to move their, and also just the wind and water, just to move their seeds so they can better disperse. So this is like kind of the first plants to really use that ability. See, what's this big thing standing up here? Oh wow. Here we see a lepidodendron, or a scale tree. Now this is a huge tree, standing up to 30 meters tall, or 100 feet tall. These lepidodendron are among the tallest and most common trees you'll find in this forest. While they and many other plants here may look like trees, they are in fact not trees at all. This lepidodendron is actually more closely related to modern quillworts than any tree. So quillworts are like a little plant that like to hang out around waterways, so you wouldn't really expect it to become something like this. You wouldn't expect it to become a huge tree. And their stems are mostly derived from wood, which is the plant being held up by the rather pellicle material. The outer surface of the plant stem is also photosynthetic, which gives it this green hue that allows it to photosynthesize and make its own food. The leaves of lepidodendron are very simple and resemble blades of grass. These leaves go straight out of the stem of the plant and arrange in a spiral that winds up and down the entire stem. As the plant grows older, leaves fall off, leaving scars where they once attached. These scars form the scale-like texture that give the plant its name. In about 300 million years, or the 1800s, the scale texture of the fossilized remains of lepidodendron will lead to a habit of fossilized specimens being exhibited in England as giant petrified snakes. So people used to think these were giant snakes, believe it or not. And you can really tell from the texture that looks very snake-like, but no, it's from a tree. The roots of lepidodendron are very simple. They were covered in simple root hairs that brought nutrients to the plant, and like the leaves above ground, left small scars on the surface of the roots. So you can see here a good example of the roots here. Very beautiful plant. Amazing. I really love the atmosphere of this. Like, it just really feels like you're in the middle of the Carboniferous. I kind of wish more came out of this. This was only the bit that was released. Let's see what else we can find around here. I already had a look at you. That's another version of the Lepidodendron. Oh, not the Lepidodendron. Of the terrace. Let's have a look. There's some nice plants up here, these tall ones. Oh, there's still the mana. I've got information here. Just not in the game yet. These are a real weird type of tree. They're spore bearing adolescent trees. Oh, arborescent, not adolescent. I'm not. They were related to club mosses, believe it or not, and are even more closely related to keelworts than the Lepidodendron, those big trees that we saw before. So they're known a lot from the late Carboniferous, but went to extinct in the early Permian, and are found pretty much everywhere from Great Britain to Zimbabwe, and there's a lot of different species. And they also get pretty tall. Look, you can see here, they get about the same height. Another dominant tree in the ecosystem. They get quite tall. They have like these single trunks with these fronds coming out, even though they didn't have real wood. Yeah, and have these very simple leaves. But it worked for them. They look like they're doing fine. Pretty healthy. Very, very cool. It's amazing because a lot of these are not related to trees that you have today. A lot of the trees that we have today, like conifers and oaks, they didn't exist back then. They haven't evolved yet. Same with a lot of things. We were only just starting to get... What was living around this time were giant insects, which were taking the niches that were available in here. So they would become the mega herbivores, the mega carnivores, the browsers, the grazers. They pretty much took the places of what the dinosaurs and then the mammals would take in the future. They pretty much laid the groundwork. You'd have Arthropleura, which is not in this, but 8-foot-long millipedes that were basically their version of a buffalo, just coming in and eating the mega herbivore of this time, along with Meganeura, which was like a falcon. We even have evidence that there were giant griffin flies, similar in size to Meganeura, going through the Permian. It was a niche that was available, and these animals filled it, which is real interesting. We'll move around here, see what else we can find. Making our way. So you can spot something I haven't spotted yet. I already had a look at you. You could even just sit and just listen to watch how beautiful this world is. Oh, I think this is a juvenile. This is a juvenile Lepidodendron. So, the scaly branches of Lepidodendron don't begin splitting from the central trunk until they reach maturity, meaning they spend most of their lives looking like a giant green toilet brush. Of course, toilets and their brushes won't be invented for another 300 million years, so likely be such a pale embarrassment over the resemblance. They wouldn't care. They look cool though. See if we spotted this one before. Yeah, we just talked about this one. Let's see if you can spot anything new. So you can see, just imagine like a big amphibian or parareptile swimming through here. Oh, look what I found. I was gonna say there's anything like this. This looks like a Meganeura standing. That gives you a good example of the size. It's quite cool. Never noticed that in the time that I've been playing on this. Let's see what these plants are. Spiniphyllum. Spiniphyllum's exact position in the plant family tree is still a matter of debate among scientists today. Is it a basal fern or a basal horntail? Maybe it represents the last common ancestor between the two. Either way, such problems are common with identifying relationships among the many plants of this geologic age. And many of the groups of modern plants are either have yet to diverge from each other or have only recently done so. So this is basically when the first rainforests and the first plants really started to get big and diversify. So this is like a really important history if you're a botanist. These plant stems are ringed with horrors of leaves, much like calamites, though their leaves are often triangular rather than needle-like. The reproductive portions of the plant produce spores are known from the form genus Belmantes. Let's see if we can walk our way on this log. Oh. We made it. Let's see what else we can find. Oh, look over here. Here we have the first conifer trees. This is like the beginning of the pine trees. Very, very first. Aren't they beautiful? Have a look at them. So they look a lot like cypress from the upper Pennsylvanians, so the late Carboniferous, found in Europe and North America. And they actually preferred upland areas, so this must be somewhere in this sort of upland area, so you get to see these trees. And they're actually found a lot with wingless insects, because a lot of the insects that lived at this time were also sap eaters, so you'd see giant cockroaches and such. Very interesting bunch. Come and try and lick all the sap they can. It's probably try to defend themselves from them as well. Some sort of predation. It's pretty awesome. Like the diversity of the Carboniferous is just so underrated, because everyone just lumps it into giant bugs, but it's so much more than that. Such an interesting period of time that's also very overlooked. What else we can find around here? I think we just circled back. Oh. Yeah, we've just circled back, because that's where we started. And then we can have a look at these. Ooh, I'm surprised I didn't hurt myself. Now what's really interesting is, like, people asking probably with this video, why is it called the Carboniferous? Well, this is because all this made the coal that we use today. Because, it explains here, all things must come to an end. Though the plants in this forest have a slightly different end in store for them than most modern plants do. The conditions of the swampy areas these plants grow in, combined with the apparent lack of microorganisms capable to properly break down the plant stems, means that the dead plants will remain pretty much as they are for a long time. So a lot of plants, like wood, is full of lignin, which is very hard to break apart and what gives wood its strength. Now, a lot of the bacteria and fungi that lived at this time had not evolved to break them down yet, so basically if a plant died, it would just stay there until it would be pretty much destroyed or burnt in a fire. Because the carbon contained in the stems of these plants isn't released back into the environment through decay, like decaying plants do today, that carbon and the energy bound up in the molecules as the carbon helps form can stay in the plant for thousands or millions of years until the biomass of the coal forest is converted into coal. Not all plants remains become coal. Some of them become petrified and have organic carbon combining molecules, placing the minerals that eventually become a fossil. So that's how most fossilizing works. But what happened was, a lot of these, the thing with the Carboniferous is that allowing these big insects to exist, and also had higher, probably about 162% or another 60% more oxygen than we have today. So what would happen is, obviously that fuels real big forest fires, and obviously when you have lots of dead stuff on the ground that's full of carbon, that's just lying there, heavy oxygen, that's going to be a great recipe for very common forest fires. So that pretty much means that all of these, the only way that these forests really got cleared, because there was nothing breaking them down, it was just all forest fires. So what would happen is, everything would burn down, it would all become smashed in the rock, and it would become coal. And this is why it's called the Carboniferous, because pretty much most of the world's coal was made from 360 to about now where we are, about 300 million years ago, during that time of the Carboniferous. And you can see that layer all over the world. It's where most of it was made because the conditions were so right for making coal, because there was nothing breaking down the plants, there was heavy oxygen, which made heavy forest fires, so it became perfect for making coal. And to think that all of this powers our world today with coal. And that's now really interesting thing about, like, thinking this is basically the very basic, all of this feeds our civilization today. And I find that ridiculously interesting, and I just love it. And I think we're going to take a little drone that we have. I think that'll be fun to have a good look through. We'd even make it evening if you like. We're going to have night in the Carboniferous, and then we'll change camera. Let's see, so we can see our world from the top here. Now doesn't that look beautiful? You see, these are the first canopies. You can see the Walaka, or however you pronounce it, over here. The very first conifer plants, also the lepidodendrons and all the other ferns and horsetail relatives coming up out of the ground here. It's just beautiful. So look, there's another juvenile lepidodendron. It'll fly through here. But then we're a Meganera, or just a drone, flying through here looking for prey. That's pretty awesome. And then I can return it to nighttime. Isn't that spooky? Imagine how spooky this would be, looking around for giant bugs. You don't want an 8-foot millipede crawling all over you. Though I think it would be quite scary, because a lot of the scariness about these creepy crawlies is that they're creepy and they're crawly, but it's more like an actual animal when they're walking past you. This is what the Carboniferous would look like at night. And I think we'll change our camera back. So look, now we've got. So this is our flashlight. Imagine a big bug or a giant scorpion or a giant salamander or a labyrinthodont come and attack you. And also, believe it or not, this time the Carboniferous is where we got the first like reptiles. We had small little things like Hybodus and other small things that became this is what the time where synapsids and diapsids split. So synapsids would become what would be known today as mammals, like us, elephants, primates, all of them, while the diapsids, because synapsid means one or none, and diapsid means two. So what would happen is, anapsid is so. Synapsid is 1 and diapsid is 2. So diapsids would move on to become the birds and reptiles that we know today, and eventually dinosaurs too. So you think this is like the stage of basically what was to come. This was the first forest. This was breeding what to become. This would become the dinosaurs, and then it would become the extinction, and it would become us. That's a real interesting thing to think about. Yeah, well, just wander around in the dark. It's just so atmospheric. I love this little simulator. Even though there's no animals in it, it's just so atmospheric. You really feel like you're in the Carboniferous. And I think we might have to change it to daytime again. Let's say the night is over. And it's a fresh morning on the Carboniferous. So yeah, I'll put the link to this in the description if you want to have a play around. And I really hope that this game, even though yeah there's not much support for it, I really hope someone comes back and makes something like this. I think something like this with a lot of animals and stuff could easily be decent purchase, because it just explains such an interesting time in Earth's history. And that's something that appeals to everyone, because everyone loves those weird, creepy, crawly giant bugs. And it's a really good opportunity to teach people about evolution and all of these plants and such. So yeah, I really enjoyed making this video. I really hope you guys like and subscribe, and bye bye.